Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on scaling innovations from public-private partnership. I'm Niklas Blomberg. I'm the Executive Director of IHI, and I'm here for a brief introduction. But maybe before we start, just a quick introduction to your hosts and panel today. So, Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself and introduce the panel?
Sure, I'm happy to. So, hi everyone, good afternoon. As Nicholas said, thanks so much for being here with us. I'm Lisa Lienhoutz-Martin. I am the CEO of the Forward Group, a strategic consulting firm specializing in public-private partnerships and innovation. And then I'm also, go ahead, back to you, Nicholas.
Okay, thanks. I thought you would introduce the panel, but
sure, let me do so. So I'll hand the mic to each of you. And we're also joined by Matthias Intilo. Matthias, I'll hand the mic to you to introduce yourself, please.
All right, Matthias Möllenborn here from Novo Nordisk. I'm also part of some of the FPO working groups for the IHI and participated myself in many different projects. So happy to moderate the session later on, questions and answers.
Okay, maybe I continue. So my name is Thilo Hache. I'm from Novartis, working out of Switzerland, and I am the project manager of Mobilized on the FPR side, and I will introduce sustainability or scaling of Mobilized and follow-on projects to you later today.
Great, thank you guys for the introductions.
Hi, everybody. I'm Patrick Ryan. I'm Vice President of Observational Health Analytics at Johnson & Johnson, and I'll be sharing some of the experience we had with the Eden project.
So thanks, everyone. And so before I hand you into the capable hands of Lisa and the team, I just want to say a few words from our perspective as IHI or previously IMI on why this is really, really important for us. So this is really, for me, a discussion on how you drive exploitation and the impact of project. And this comes up as a key question in almost every project that I interact with and that our science officers interact with. And it really is a very difficult decision. And I think what we have to do in our projects is really to approach the question of how do you scale the outcomes and how do you drive the impact from these public-private partnerships in a way quite similar to how you drive investment decisions. And so those are difficult because they do require focus, effort to really pay off. And so this field manual, and the field manual have been around for a few years, so it's great to see a few case studies coming out. It was developed by FPA, so the Pharmaceutical Industry Association in Europe, really to help all the projects across the portfolio to scale. And I think it's really one of the few really practical guides on how do you actually make all of those decisions that need to be made in order to operationalize or scale project outcomes. And so it will help you, and I think Lisa and everyone today will guide you through this, but really, how do you formulate that sort of ambitious scale-up vision, and how do you assess what skills are required and capabilities are required in the project? And I would say it's important to do this early on in the project cycle, because if you need to bring in new or additional skills or capabilities, those are things that needs to be addressed quite early in the project lifetime. And therefore, I think the field guide really will help you to identify this most viable path to scaling. And so I would really encourage you to as a takeaway from today's webinar, to bring this into the early planning of your projects, and then together with the stakeholders, both within the project and the larger landscape, try to drive the engagement that you really need as a basis for sustained impact. So with that, I will hand you back to the team, but I think we all look forward to hear this example of successes, the case studies, and really thinking about and take the opportunities to quiz our panel on how do you do that transition to move from a research project into a fully blown sort of operational practice. So with that, I'll hand you back to Lisa, and thank you everyone for joining today.
Thank you so much, Nicholas, and thank you for your introductory words. And I think a lot of wisdom is shared there. We've had the field manual now for a few years, and I think we're only expanding the knowledge and expanding the cases, and that's what we get to hear about today. Nicholas, you said it really well when you talked about, this is almost an impact is really what we're after here. And it's almost looking at it through the lens of a future investor, and really understanding value. And also really thinking about doing this early and doing it in the context that you live in. So I think that's a really good summary and a nice intro to what we'll talk about today. So the first segment, we'll be speaking about the field manual, and I want to walk you through it in terms of being a theory, and really how you can apply it to your situation. After that, we'll have a case study from Eden and talking about their approaches and challenges and how they achieve scale and impact. And Patrick is here today to share with you about that. Then next, we're happy to have Thilo here to speak about the experience on Mobilize-D and the respective approaches that were taken there and how they've been successful in overcoming challenges to have some really exciting outcomes to talk to you about today. Then we will jump into a panel discussion where we'll talk about what it's like in terms of the real lived experience of being in a project and being in a consortium, how you can effectively take it to scale. And we have Matthias to help moderate us there. We'll also have a chance in each of the sections to take some of your questions. So please feel free to pop any of your questions into the chat, and we'll try to get to everyone as we go through. And that's really the agenda that we have for you today. So let's go ahead and jump in. Okay, so I'm really happy to be able to speak to you about the field manual. This is something that I authored several years ago now, and continues to be a good structure in terms of tackling this really tricky issue of sustainability or scaling for impact. It's important that I'm here today to talk to you, and I'm excited to do so, not just to talk to you about a framework, but to hear and learn from one another about the real examples of what has worked in practice. Also, I want to empower you as practitioners to help you achieve success in your projects, bring new ideas to life in the world that last long after the project has ended. And also, why we are all here to make an impact on health and advance healthcare for everyone. So to kick off and frame a bit before I go into the field manual, I want to take a moment to think about what innovation is. And innovation is really the common denominator of all of these projects within IHI. And at the core, when I think about innovation, I think about several paradoxes. Maybe that's why innovation is so tricky, because we have to balance these paradoxes. So I wanted to mention several of these paradoxes to you as we think about the field manual and we think about this framework. So the first paradox of innovation for me is that uncertainty is inherent. It's supposed to be there. But while uncertainty is inherent, we can accept it. So it's not a problem. On the other side of this uncertainty, we can acknowledge our capability. We can acknowledge the expertise and experience that we have that's proven and concrete. So uncertainty, paradox with capability. And then we have the unknown. We will never know all when we set out on an innovative project within IHI, and that's okay. But while we have this unknown, we can also rely on structure and a strategic plan. And that's where we can bring in frameworks like the field manual. Even if they will shift, good to have structure in the unknown. And then the third paradox that we can keep in mind is confusion. So given all this uncertainty and unknown, it's hard to understand how we'll all fit together and where the road will lead. But actually, that's an opportunity for creativity. That's space. So you can draw on capability, you can draw on structure and strategy and create. And enjoy and remember that there's a reason that you're doing this and that you're doing a new thing, and keep that excitement at the center of what you're doing. So now that we've talked about a few of the paradoxes, let's jump into the field manual itself. First, I'll talk about what the field manual is. As you can see here, it's a resource to help take assets to scale, and it's really a blueprint for success, knowing that success can look like a lot of different things. If we go into the next slide, it's really about how do we navigate? How do we navigate with the unknown, with the uncertainty, with this confusion? And there are 3 core modules in that, and I will walk you through briefly each core module, but here I'll introduce them. So first, if we think about navigating innovation as a navigation journey, we first want to have a vision. So the first module is called just that, the scale-up vision. This is where you want to have a high-level vision of what you would like success to look like. So how do you do that? Well, you define success quite simply. What impact do you want to have? Who will benefit? Then thinking about this in terms of value, just as Nicholas was saying in his introductory remarks, thinking about what's the value proposition of this asset and at scale, and who will benefit? What problems are being solved? Then third is defining the aspiration. So what's the scale aspiration? And by aspiration, I mean mechanism. And we'll get into that in the next module a bit. So now that we have our vision, if you think about the second module, you want to think about context. You want to think of the landscape. Where are we? You want to locate yourself. So this helps to bridge from the vision to the pathway. And you see here, there are 4 components under that landscape. So you can think about drivers, you can think about opportunities, challenges, and capabilities. And we'll unpack all of that in an ecosystem context a little bit further in. So then you have the third module, and this is really, this is the scale-up pathway. And when you think about scale-up pathway, think about it as this is the rest of the road. This is after you know your vision, and then after you know your landscape, then this is the path that you'll take to achieve it. And there are three aspects here in summary that we really want to be clear on as a consortium. That's understanding ownership, that's understanding the structure of the ownership, and understanding the mechanisms or the how of how you'll get there. So really, this is about implementation. This is about walking the path and making sure scale actually takes place and impact is actually achieved. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's jump a little deeper into the first module, scale-up vision. Now, we talked a little bit about defining success, and that's pretty straightforward in the value, but I want to dig deeper into what is the aspiration. So to give it to you as a definition, aspiration is the type of scale envisioned to achieve impact. When you think about aspiration, you want to think about what type of asset you have. And then you want to think about how you're going to take that asset to scale. I will go into detail on that in just a moment, but then you also want to think about a third thing, which is the market, and that will be who is the target market that you need to reach in order to achieve your vision. And then you think back to your overall impact vision, saying who's going to benefit. And so when you think about the asset, there's really 3 buckets for this: platform, product, and knowledge. And most of I think 99.9% of all of the projects, the assets in the process can fit into one of these, but many fit into multiple as well. So a platform, as many of you will know, is a network of exchanges for information, services, or goods. And if we think about a platform, this is really the model of the day in the digital world we live in. This is the Netflix, this is the Amazon, this is the Uber. Then you have product. So this is an article or substance that is manufactured or refined. This is something like a medicine or a medical device. And then you have knowledge. So these are findings or insights that can be used to benefit. So this can be something that results in policy or an endpoint, anything along those lines. And each will have its particular ways of growth, and they can work in tandem as well. So I won't go too far into detail, but I want to give you a little bit of texture of how each of these different types of assets can be scaled, because scaling is so important in terms of the long-term impact. So for a platform, you want to think about two options, either adoption or replication. So adoption is getting more and more users. So this is having subscribers and uptake. So the bigger your platform, the stickier it is and the more successful you can be. So in order to do this, you really need to know your user. You need to know why people are using, and you need to know what we call the platform economics and how you achieve what are called network effects. And if you're not an economist, it doesn't matter. It just means what makes people use this platform and how can people use it more at increasing levels of magnitude. And the other way that you can scale a platform is for replication. And just think about replication as repetition. So you can apply a platform to a new disease area, a subject matter, or a geography. And here you want to think how it will be replicated and what aspects are replicable and also what are not. So that's really platform. And if we go down to the second type of asset, product, this is maybe a little more familiar to some of you and quite straightforward. So here we're just thinking about uptake. So maximization of consumption or use of an asset. And when you think about uptake, you really want to think about the delivery model, you want to think about how you compare this maybe with a platform to leverage even a strength of a platform. And thinking about how this can be complementary. This is a great place to think about how you can work with other consortia assets as well. So then we go down to knowledge. And here it's a little different than the other two, but certainly can be used as a complement. The two ways that you can scale knowledge is through dissemination, where you spread information. And you want to do that strategically, and you want to do it as widely as you can. And here you're thinking about the objective and what do you want people to know and what do you want them to do with that knowledge? What's the final thing you'd like them to act upon or achieve? And then the other way to think about knowledge is through leverage. So think about using knowledge to a maximum advantage and strategic benefit. How can it be leveraged to achieve a particular outcome or endpoint? You want to think also about who's best placed to do that and how can it best be exploited? And then how does that link to impact? This is also a place to think about other partners, whether they're within your consortia or in the broader ecosystem. And we'll talk about that a little more in the second module. So after you understand the aspiration, you can think about your market. So thinking about the target market, who it is, where they are, and what their needs are. So here you can see different examples of markets, whether that's patients, healthcare providers, payers, industry, could be regulatory and policy, research institutions, global health stakeholders, advocates, and I'm sure there are many more. But it's good to understand who they are for you and your project. And then lastly, you have the impact vision. So what impact is envisioned and for whom? And here you may have multiple again, and that's good, but just know concretely who is benefiting from your impact vision, whether that's the patient, a health system, science, industry, or world. Next slide, please. Okay, so the second module is the landscape scan. And as I mentioned, this is really about context and knowing the ecosystem within which you operate. And this is especially critical for public-private partnerships because there are so many stakeholders at so many levels. So when you do a scan of your landscape, you want to think about it at 3 levels. So first you can think about it at the consortium level. Then you want to think about it as from the member level or member organization level and all of the ecosystem that entails within either that's an industry organization or academic institution or an SME. And then also think about the broader ecosystem as well. So you want to think about the policy context, you want to think about the economic context, you want to think about the innovation context. All these are really relevant. And because we have so many stakeholders, that's a lot of the strength of the consortia, but it also brings with it complexity. The good news here is that we can break it down, and the field manual helps you to do that by thinking about it through these three levels. Now, when you're doing the landscape scan, you also want to think about what to look for. So you have consortium, you have members, you have the broader ecosystem, and then you want to look at the DOCCs. And as we've mentioned, that includes the drivers, the opportunities, the challenges, and the capabilities. So drivers are really things that you want to focus on that can get you to success. It drives the success of your project, just as the name implies. So this can include someone who can be a champion of your innovation. It could be a new policy that could promote what you're doing or otherwise. You also want to think about opportunities. So opportunities could help your asset go to scale. So that can be a funding call from a philanthropy or government. That could be other IMI projects. There are a lot of different opportunities that exist. It could be other innovations that you can draw from and build off of. And then challenges, of course, are things that if you do not manage them, could pose a threat to your scale up. Here you want to think about a lot of things like market dynamics, shifting priorities, shifting budgets. Also, within projects, you may have turnover and thinking about how you may bridge those skills and gaps and have continuity. And once you think about these drivers, opportunities, and challenges, then the last one is a bit more specific, but it's about capabilities. You need to think about, okay, given what is in this context, what capabilities are required? So what skills do you need? What expertise do you need in order to take it to scale? And scale isn't just an insight, isn't just a product, it isn't just a platform. It's actually the expertise and know-how to grow it and embed it and make sure that it lasts beyond the life of the grant and also that has long-term value. So really how you want to do that is to map skills and think about not just from a scientific perspective, but also additional aspects for scale, whether that's business development or marketing or government relations. Thinking about the question, what do you really need? Next slide, please. So we've talked about having your vision. We've talked about having your landscape scan. So we're getting into navigation. Now, for the third module, let's think about the scale-up pathway. This is the road. This is the rest of the road and how we put it all together and get to the holy grail of our summit, which is scale and impact. So once we have the asset, once we have the aspiration, once we know our market, once we have the landscape scan, then we want to think about how it all comes together. We're going to look at, I'll go into 3 different aspects here. The ownership, really who owns? Is there IP? Then the structure, that is how. How do you want to organize? What's going to help achieve success? What's the best fit type of organization or structure? And then you want to think about mechanisms. How do you want to implement? What are going to be the strategies that are going to help you to be successful? And what are those that you actually don't need? So thinking about all of those is going to help you really be concrete in a step-by-step approach to scale. So it's not just the innovation, it's actually how it's going to be implemented. And when you think about this, there's really no one size fits all. You have a lot of options, and it's really about thinking what's the best fit for your particular asset or set of assets. If we go into ownership a little bit, there can be different ways to do this. A basic one is to have centralized ownership, where you might have a new legal entity with a mandate to scale. You might have a merged ownership. There have been examples of mergers or acquisitions with IMI assets, and that's another way to do it in a very sustainable manner. You can have decentralized ownership. This is more in a digital context for something blockchain related as well. And it might be in more limited cases, but it's still good to put there as an option. Shared ownership can be there, where it can be pre-competitive IP or otherwise, especially in cases of knowledge. And in other cases, an exit from ownership may make the most sense. So it really depends on what you have and where you want to go. In terms of structure, there are a lot of different ways in a public-private partnership to incorporate, and it can be on the public side or it can be on a spectrum all the way over to the private side. So if we think about it more of the private side, then that would be a for-profit. If you think about more on the public side, it can be a foundation or nonprofit. If you want to blend between the two, you can think about a social business or a B Corp. A DAO is a blockchain-enabled way to organize business. You can actually stay as a public-private partnership for the long term. And then a little bit more on the public side is a coalition, and acquisition is over on the private side of it, and handoff can be either, but tends to be more on the public side. In terms of mechanisms, this helps to sketch out a little bit when we think about strategic implementation for scaling an asset. So these come from the School of Business, but can also be used by any type of organization, whether public or private. Licensing out, so licensing your rights to parties can be a strategy. You can also have an open license. You can have agile strategies where you address the DOCCs in bespoke ways that are really fit to your technology. You can have selective outsourcing, so that can be something where you rely on others and outsource. You can also have synergies, and this is a broad term and it really can mean a lot of different things, but just thinking about what exists in your ecosystem, and again, can help drive you to impact. And finally, in-kind expertise, then using that strategically to help go to scale, which many consortium do, and something that actually can be considered in the longer term as well, outside the life cycle of the grant. So that's a little bit more about the pathway, and I think it's important to note that there are many paths, as I had said before, and just feeling like this is a framework, but feel free to chart your own way. And as I was saying in my introductory remarks, we can always strategize, but know that things are unknown and things will change. So feel free to start early, yes, but also revisit. So this is something that will change over time as you get more information, as you go further into the process, further into implementation, you'll know more what's going to work and what isn't. So it can be really seen as a working document. Next slide, please. So if we think about how to use the field manual in an applied manner, we have created a tool called the Scale and Uptake Canvas, and it is intended to help you take the assets to scale and have uptake, as the name implies. And what it is really is just boiling down all of the 3 modules into one place on a canvas. So this is a step-by-step user-friendly guide. It's something where you can print out in large format, put it in a conference room, and work on with consortium members to really be clear on where you're going and how you're going to get there. It includes the impact vision, it includes the type of asset, the aspiration, the market, ownership, structure, and then the mechanisms. It's not meant to be an end-all be-all, but it's meant to be very practical in terms of all having consensus on what it is you're doing for each of these critical elements of scale. So a lot of consortia have found this to be a really helpful tool, especially at the beginning, to identify sustainability, and also can be something you revisit going forward. I recommend making this visible as well, because it can guide a lot of the work. Inevitably, we have a lot of complexity, a lot of the innovations are quite advanced, so it's good to have this as something of a North Star to come back to give clarity and help as a navigation tool. Slide, please. Okay, so that's the field manual in a few slides. I want to take just a couple minutes to open it up for discussion. So if you have any questions or remarks, please feel free to pop in the chat, and we'll go ahead and take a couple of those. I don't see any questions yet, so don't be shy. I'm sure you must have a question. Okay, well, while people are thinking a bit, just to say that to sum it all up, again, there's no one right way, but taking a structure in really increases your chances for success. So yeah, bring this in and bring it in early and bring it in often and revisit. And I would say as well, don't be afraid to learn from others, because IHI and IMI before, we have a lot of best practices and lessons learned, and something that can only benefit from collaboration as well. So maybe that's a lead-in for the case studies, where we can hear from some of the practitioners and the great work that has been done, and some of the deep insights and stories around scale and impact. So with that, I will hand over to Patrick, who can share with us a little bit about Eden.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you to IHI for inviting me to talk about the Eden Project, which is an IMI2 program that finished up in October of 2024. What I'd like to do is summarize briefly the project and some of the lessons learned that came specifically as it relates to lessons learned, good and bad, about scaling innovations. And while the field guide came out midway through our program, I'm going to try my best to at least highlight and connect to some of the ideas that Lisa has shared in walking through the manual. Next slide, please. So just to introduce the Eden program, Eden was the European Health Data and Evidence Network. And our vision was to create a trusted observational research ecosystem so that we could generate reliable real-world evidence to enable better health decisions and outcomes and care. And so specifically in the project, as we initiated it, our goal was to create a new paradigm for the discovery and analysis of healthcare data across Europe by building a large-scale federated network of data sources standardized to a common data model. So the basic idea here is that health systems and other institutions who have access to patient-level data, we wanted to standardize that data to enable standardized analytics to be run in a secure way, such that we could generate real-world evidence across that data network and demonstrate how this was feasible to facilitate secondary use of data across Europe. Next slide. The Eden project, it started back in November of 2018, and it lasted for through 2024. We had 25 partners and a pretty substantial budget as it related to resources for the consortium. However, what I'm going to actually walk you through in terms of scalability was not how we use these resources inside of the consortium, but actually how we try to use it to scale a community outside of the consortium. Next slide. One of the big innovations we actually had in our program was to use the resources at our disposal to create a series of open call processes to engage the broader ecosystem. So using Lisa's parlance here, when we think about adoption, this wasn't just about adoption and scaling for the consortium itself, but it was actually having the consortium be the enabler for adoption of others. We did this in two ways. We actually had an open call to identify data sources who wanted to standardize their data and become part of this broader European network. And we also had an open call for participation from small to medium enterprises, which were entities that we trained up to be a commercial ecosystem to support data partners more broadly. And so by doing this, we actually created the mechanism for us to use some of our consortium funding to support these other projects in moving forward. Next slide. So some of the tangible successes we had in the Eden project, one was building an entire ecosystem of small to medium enterprises. We actually ended up training 64 different organizations and providing certification for how these organizations learn about the technical infrastructure associated with data standardization and analytics platforms. These organizations not only could support the consortium in its immediate work, but actually gave them the foundation to support work outside of the consortium. And indeed, even though the project's finished, many of these SMEs are continuing to use the training that they got during the Eden project to support academic, regulatory, and industry partners in their continued use of real-world evidence. And for those who are interested in the RWE space, the entire catalog of SMEs is available, and we encourage you to tap into this rich ecosystem that we've built. Next slide. The other big thing that we did was we standardized a whole lot of data across Europe. You know, when we started, there was a real question of how much data exists across Europe and whether or not it's going to be useful. When we started, we had hoped that we were going to be able to get a few dozen data sources to join this journey with us. But in total, across the project, we identified and selected 187 data partners, all of which were able to standardize their data to the OMOP Common Data Model. And the reason why this was valuable was not just to demonstrate the feasibility and the scope of the project, but now to create Europe's largest data network that becomes accessible beyond the purview of the project. And so this can be both what Lisa was talking about adoption, where the platform is the OMOP Common Data Model itself, but it can also be replication in that we created a network of data sources, but then subsequently many different data networks have been created built on the exact same foundation. Next slide. One of the things that we did in order to enable the SME certification program was we created a training platform. And our training platform was called the Eden Academy. And this was a place where, as a consortium, we put multiple educational resources available. And we made the entire platform available, not just for the SMEs that were going through certification, but for anybody who would benefit from it. And actually, what we were amazed to find out was that we had thousands of active learners around the world who took advantage of this resource far beyond the boundaries of Europe and well beyond the confines of our consortium. And so as Lisa was talking about scaling up knowledge and dissemination, creating platforms for dissemination and creating educational resources that others can take advantage of proved to be one of the successes in really bringing people to the community and getting them actively engaged and up to speed. Next slide. Now, the Eden project itself was a self-contained public-private partnership that ran for 6 years. But we specifically early on decided in this project that it was important to figure out our sustainability plan early in the project and make sure that we were fully implemented so that the project would continue long beyond our project. We have a document at the end of the project called our Story book, but I like to think that actually our story is still being written because so much of the value of Eden is actually coming on following our Eden project formal closure. And I'll highlight just a few of those examples in my last couple slides. Next slide. One of the things that we were actually quite proud to see was that when the Draghi report came out that highlighted the future of European competitiveness, one of the areas in that document that it highlighted was to maximize the impact of the European health data space. EHDS is this emerging legislation about how data can be used to improve healthcare. And one of the things that was called out in the Draghi report specifically was in this section 1, chapter 9, it specifically said that in the run-up to the full application of the EHDS regulation, it's necessary to continue and increase efforts to standardize existing data sources to a common data model, building on the work initiated by the European Health Data and Evidence Network, Eden, set to end in October 2024. So it was a great call out that even in the midst of our project, we were seeing folks talking about sustainability and thinking about that the specific goal isn't complete a public-private partnership, but actually leverage the private partnership and build atop of that. And we focused both during the end of the project as well as now in the couple of years after with specifically that build. Next slide. One of the things we established was the Eden Foundation. This was an explicit choice to create a not-for-profit entity that would be the owner of the platform and the ecosystem that we created. So as Lisa was highlighting, it's important to think about what that structure is going to be up front. And we spent a lot of time during the project coming up with the governance and the appropriate structure such that when the project ended, the Eden Foundation was already stood up and was basically open for business to continue the durability of the assets that were created in the Eden project. This includes both having access to this data network with a contractual mechanism to partner with sites, as well as many of the resources, including the Eden Academy, having a place and a home to endure beyond the project's completion. Next slide. One of the biggest successes actually was the leveraging of these resources in other contexts. Specifically, the European Medicines Agency established the Darwin EU Data Network. And this is now a regulatory grade system that's being used to generate evidence and to support safety decisions that are being made by the EMA. And that data network that the EMA has created for the Darwin EU leveraged the Eden project and leverages the OMOP common data model, and in fact, selected data sources that were from the Eden project. So here, the project didn't just provide a one-time opportunity for a data partner to engage, but actually created this future horizon of participation that now many data partners are able to leverage a new partnership with the EMA. And the Darwin EU effort continues forward, adopting the same data standard. Next slide. The other thing I want to highlight is that in the Eden project, we put a huge amount of effort on community building. And this wasn't just community within the consortium, but was community within the broader ecosystem. One of the things that we did, because we were leveraging open community standards from the Observational Health Data Sciences and Informatics, or Odyssey community, was this European project really took the reins of leading the European efforts in that global community. That involved actually creating national nodes with leadership distributed across many different countries. Actually, now we have 19 European national nodes in total. And this engagement of leadership across the community really it becomes a multiplier effect to build adoption and expansion. Next slide. The last thing I'll highlight, and building off of the Draghi report, that this idea that what you really want to do is you want to build something that people can build atop. We've now seen many different European projects using the OMOP common data model, using the open source tools that the Eden project and the Odyssey community has built. And one of the big success that I see for the Eden project isn't what we completed during the course of the project, but is really this enabler for other projects to really get started. And I'm quite optimistic that this is just even though I'm really proud of what we've done and proud of all the projects that have been kickstarted as the result of the Eden project, I'm even more excited about what's coming to bear. The reason why I'm highlighting this, though, is as you are starting your project, I think it's really a very useful thing to connect to Lisa's field map as you think about not just what are we going to do for the consortium during the confines of the consortium timelines, but instead think about what can your consortium do to be the catalyst to enable something that's going to long endure beyond your project. I'm really proud of what we did as an Eden community to really get that ball rolling. So my last slide, I'll just highlight that if anybody is interested in engaging in the Odyssey community or the Eden program, feel free to reach out to me, both if you're interested in Eden itself, but also just if there's anything that I can support you with as you're thinking about your future projects and trying to embrace what Lisa and the team has presented, then I'm happy to share my perspectives and lessons learned. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Patrick. And this is a powerful example, if I can say a textbook example of what we want to see in terms of impact and longevity, and just looking at the legacy that Eden has already created. I love the slide that you just showed with all the other projects that have benefited from it. So that's fantastic. Let's take a moment then to open up for any questions on Eden before we jump into the second case study. So again, if you do have a question around Eden, then feel free to pop it into the chat.
Yeah, and I'll have to apologize. I can't see the chat on my side. So if somebody does see it and want to read off a question, I'm happy to answer it.
Sure. So I do see one right away. What type of data are shared in the Eden platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So specifically, Eden has created a distributed data network. What that means is the different types of data could include electronic health record data, administrative claims, national registry data. However, as a distributed data network, we don't share the patient level data itself. Rather, we conduct analyses whereby researchers design standardized analytic packages that are sent to the data, conduct an analysis, and then send back only the aggregate summary statistics. So one of the real clever things about a distributed data network is that you can share evidence without sharing patient level data or running the risk of any concerns about patient privacy. So your Eden project created the largest European distributed data network and has now been replicated in other examples like Darwin. And we've proven that you can actually answer questions by working with one of these networks by using standardized analytics against this standardized data framework. And the disparate data across Europe have now been laid out and proved feasible for this purpose.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. I do see another question here. I'll just read it out for you. Will the Eden Foundation keep on existing, or will it merge into something new? As I can imagine, the new generation IHI projects bring similar or complementary results.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So when we started the Eden Project and thought about sustainability, one of the open questions was, do we need yet another foundation? And what was going to be the specific role? And one of the things we decided relatively early on was that we did need a foundation, but the goal of the foundation would be to enable others. And so now we're actually seeing the Eden Foundation be a partner in future IHI projects, whether that be to help convene or coordinate, or to be the conduit to this data network to facilitate other partnerships. So programs such as IHI Greg now are using the Eden Foundation to enable some of its work. And so I actually do, while I am not directly involved in it, Peter Reinbeck at Erasmus and Danny Prieto Alhambra at Oxford and Carlos Diaz at Synapse are leading the Eden Foundation. I would say that I very much envision that the Eden Foundation is going to have a long trajectory, because it both can support specific interactions with different stakeholder groups, but it also can be a partner for other adjacent efforts. And hopefully what we'll see is we don't need every IHI project spinning off its own foundation, but instead we can figure out how do resources that projects create find their right home, and potentially Eden Foundation can be that home for some of those resources of related subsequent projects.
Great. Patrick, I see a couple more questions, so let me read those out to you, and then I'll let you take them in tandem. So how is Eden Foundation being funded? First question. Second question, is it possible to drive ML or DL algorithms on Eden, or just statistical analysis? And similar to the first question, then the last question is, where does the Eden Foundation money come from for the future?
Got it. That's great. At least I'd have to say that your presentation was much clearer because you got fewer questions than me. So I apologize for that.
Too kind.
So to the first question, the Eden Foundation has multiple sources of revenue, I guess you'd say. One of them is that they are providing services to private industry. So pharmaceutical companies who are looking to identify the feasibility of conducting analysis across the data network, or looking for a partner to run an analysis, are able to work with the Eden Foundation. The Eden Foundation has created its own industry advisory board. So there are partners who are providing some supplementary support so that there can be a core critical research staff in place to facilitate those types of activities. But also the Eden Foundation is a partner in multiple subsequent EU public-private partnership projects, such as IHI Greg and subsequent proposals. And so using resources to play that role of an enabler is something that's sustaining it. I do think that that's sustainable, particularly as we see the increased adoption of the OMOP common data model across Europe and the increased use of standardized analytics, that there's going to be more and more demand from more and more stakeholders, whether it be industry, regulatory agencies, healthcare systems, or other groups that may see Eden Foundation as a valuable partner in their research pursuits. To the technical question on the second one, so within this distributed data network environment, we run all sorts of different types of analysis, including characterization analysis, which are descriptive statistics, population level estimation, which is like causal inference, and patient level prediction, which is machine learning applications. All of that's something that's within purview of what we have been doing and publishing papers and will continue to do through the Eden Foundation.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, great responses, and overall just a wonderful example. So thank you for sharing with us about Eden. Okay, so now we have the pleasure of having Thilo share with us about Mobilize D and the experience there. So Thilo, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, we're here for also introducing a little bit about the sustainability model from Mobilize. Maybe you can go to the next slide. I have to show that one because that allows me to say what I want with this red bracket. Most important. Go to the next slide, please. The scientific background for Mobilize is about a publication from 2011 from Stephanie Studensky that correlates mortality with gait speed. Now, it's a great insight to have that. However, the challenge to broader adoption is that it's a point-in-time clinic assessment burdensome to patients. It is also variable depending on the clinician and the way it's executed. And also there is a limited correlation to disease-specific progression or disease-specific state. And it's not agnostic to measurement device, disease, or even individual sponsor interests. So if we go to the next slide, that basically founded the reason for running Mobilized, which is to develop all the data, generate all the data, the analysis and the tools for allowing a company to pick it up and develop it together with a health authority. So we called it a digital mobility outcome. Basically, it is, you can imagine, it's a wearable that you wear and that you can continuously collect data with in a more seamless way. However, it was not intended, and just to make that very clear, it was not intended to have a positive qualification opinion at the end of the project. That would simply not be possible within the 5 years, including a 2-year follow-up study with 2,500 patients included. So that just to manage expectations on that one. What was special here is that we had very experienced leadership in the project. Lynn Rochester from University of Newcastle upon Tyne. Project lead was Ronan Rubinoff and Dan Rooks from Novartis. And project management was Michael Jackson from UK project management company, and myself for sure. The size of the consortium also was quite exceptional. It's 12 pharma companies or clinical research organizations, 22 academia members, institutions or small, medium businesses around Europe, with 25 million EU funding and 25 million pharma company funding. Many knew each other from former consortia, for example, Proactive, it's also an IMI consortium, which was exacerbation prediction for COPD. And another exceptional thing was we ran our own trials. Because normally the sponsors in these settings are FPR companies, but actually here the sponsor was University of Newcastle upon Tyne. Next slide, please. On our journey, it became quite clear that we need a vision for exactly kind of working towards sustainability or scaling up. And attracting investment with this vision and that's why we targeted pharma companies by offering a sustainability option. So we generated a kind of a moonshot strategy, which is this DMO moonshot, the endpoint being that we were targeting to make this digital mobility outcome part of a diagnostic guideline for disease. And that actually triggered very clearly a backward kind of calculation what we need before that. So you see here, we would need as a step before a positive qualification opinion for the digital mobility outcome as a composite primary endpoint. We would need that before that as a secondary endpoint in the randomized controlled interventional trial. Before that, we would need the digital mobility outcome as a secondary endpoint in a trial, actually, to generate the data for the next one. And the next 3 points are actually covered by the activities that we ran. So when you go to the next slide, please. So the scope of Mobilize was actually to do the first 2 points. We had this digital mobility outcome in a technical validation study to actually see proof of concept, does it work? And we had it in a clinical validation study scaling up to 2,500 patients. So with that, we had enough data to actually publish data standardization for wearable data and sensor qualification. There was a quite powerful publication there. We had more than 120 peer-reviewed publications and 11 public webinars held to disseminate the information on that we generated. By the end of the sustainability extension of the project, we will have about 200 publications peer-reviewed. We received 2 EMA letters of support for the qualification advice, and we also had a pre-LOI meeting with the FDA. So we were in touch with 2 health authorities in 3 occasions. The results are publicly shared for research use, both from studies, the data from studies, the algorithm, the data processing pipeline, and also the tools and documentation that would enable to actually run the whole thing in a different setting. Maybe next slide. To give you a little bit of a taste on how that consortium looked like. It's a quite crowded consortium. These were the consortium partners. And if you go to the next slide, we had actually run for an extension for 2 years, what we call Sustain Mobilized, where we had a subset of the partners involved. In particular, the pharma partners were interested into extending that because due to the pandemic that we ran this whole thing through, we had a delay in the recruitment in the clinical trial and could not finish certain parts of the data analysis. Mobilized finished covering all the objectives that it was intended to do, but in order to generate the scale-up and make it easier for the solution to be picked up by a pharma company, we needed to do a few more things, which was actually making the data more digestible into the systems in pharma companies, do some analysis for prediction capacity and other things of the data, generate the tools in a format that pharma companies actually have already in their company. So code, talking about code, it's not in MATLAB, it's in Python. And also some implementation manuals that actually help to implement clinical trials using the same methodology. So this was a 2 years extension. They're fully paid by the pharma companies involved and fully onboarded with all the other academia members here. If we go to the next slide, so basically what we did there, that sustainability helped to catch up on some things from the pandemic delay, thoroughly analyze the data, offering a more solid package to the industry to pick it up and making everything available publicly, which was basically our strategy. If we go to the next slide, we can quickly just high-level summarize what actually the impact is about. So we were kind of looking here over 3 stakeholder groups, just as illustration. So patients and healthcare environment, we included patients from the start, from the protocol, from technology, from perspectives on use of technology, everything like that. We were taking care that it is patient convenience. So at-home monitoring should be easy. It doesn't need to go, they don't need to go into the clinic for these assessments. It allows better compliance and is more holistic. Typically the way that we did this is that we needed the patients to wear the device for a week, maybe during every 3 months or every 6 months, to generate the outcomes that we needed to see. But also it enabled, this data enables an informed clinician and patient conversation based on objective data, not on subjective data. So it can change the standard of care. And this is exactly what our academia members are now after. They want to include that into standard of care. Many of them have large patient populations in their clinics. Academia. So there are public data sets, there is open access codes, they can use it, they can kind of further analyze it, they can further verify different settings like different devices, different diseases, or different algorithms against it. It also kind of, as I said, allows for modular research approaches. This is something that in the past wasn't available. It was very much restricted to a disease area that these projects ran in and to the devices that were used. So our approach actually allowed a more modular approach. So if you would like to plug in a different disease into this digital mobility outcome, there is a way to do this, and that's what we actually documented. The industry now received an independent scientific validation for this digital mobility outcome to bring it to health authorities for positive qualification opinion. They received an implementation manual how to do this consistently, and these algorithms are available on, in the meantime, 4 commercially available devices. They've implemented that into their analysis pipeline even. And again, it's device agnostic data enabling modular expansion to other devices or other diseases. And if you go to the next slide, There is a little bit of a kind of enablers, challengers of the sustainability here, and so you can call it sustainability or scale up. The enablers are definitely that we had a very settled, flexible, and open academia team. Which was very helpful because there was always a solution. There was never a challenge in the meantime. They were very capable and interested CROs. The clinical research organizations really helped with the conduct of the clinical trial at this scale with the technology support, a pharma kind of quality level style clinical trial. What we learned is, first of all, putting into each other's shoes was very helpful because a tech company that develops these commercial devices has different points of view on what is useful to them compared to a pharma company, what is useful to them, and an academia member useful to them. So you needed to really put yourself into the other's shoes to understand by end of the project what would be helpful for them to pick things up and move on. We learned very heavily that clinical trial data of 2,500 patients with a 2-year follow-up is a honeypot. We got lots of interest into this data, and we had lots of kind of vibes to get access to the data as soon as possible. So that's why we made it publicly available. The tech readiness for pharma trials was definitely also an enabler. That's one thing, and the other thing is we learned that the early and intense health authority interactions was level setting, particularly in the academia members, to understand what's really needed, because academia, we learned, rarely interacts with health authorities. Hence, that interaction was a lot of learning, and we did that even before we started the whole project, just to go into the project in an educated way and know the directions. And again, putting oneself into others' shoes, business drivers of the different parties involved, clinical research organizations, tech companies, FPR, academia members, was very helpful. Challenges. The biggest challenger was the pandemic. I mean, running clinical trial in a pandemic was absolutely no fun. And the more it is kind of unbelievable that our academic team was able to scale this up to 2,500 patients between 2020 and 2022. So that is quite remarkable. And there is no such thing like no cost extension. So every extension costs money. And so these were the challengers that made the Mobilize project really challenging to run, and also the sustainability. Initially, they were quite romantic, initial sustainability ideas, particularly with regards to funding, hence my question in the chat, how Eden was funded, because everyone thought that if we put the money out there, if we put the data out there, we would get the money pretty much easily. However, funding is a challenge, in particular if you want a continuous funding stream to run infrastructure or to run a network of experts. Project duration was kind of a challenge to remember. It's 5 years preparation, 1 to 2 years before. It's a challenge to the strategy and personal changes, in particular in FPR companies. FPR companies during this time did not keep their strategy the same every year or for 5 years, for 6 years. Yes, there's a certain disease and indication strategy, but also that sometimes changes if certain studies don't work out. So that's something to deal with. And personnel changes for sure have been an effect as well. If people move away from involved FPR companies, they are not available anymore. So that's a challenge we needed to deal with. The life cycle of electronics variables is much shorter than 5 years. And even if you have a company on board providing you the asset, then still there could be kind of electronics as part of the variable that are not available anymore, in particular during the pandemic. Remember, supply chain issues. So these are the type of challenges that were quite difficult to navigate through. Different goalposts. Academia members were pretty much after going after a publication or improving standard of care. FPR members were much more about, oh, we need to make this an endpoint, a secondary endpoint or a primary endpoint. So that needed to come together. challenges continuously were the risk-averse FPR drug trial teams. As you may expect, they develop drugs, not digital mobility outcomes. And that's where their focus is. And this is why convincing them to include something which looks, which is not completely approved is always challenging. And a changing regulatory landscape, because, I mean, you may have seen that there are different directors in different health authorities moving on during this timeline, and there are regulations changing over the years, and that always is a challenge. Now, with next slide, I think we're pretty much through that. Lisa would like to have me go through the scale-up pathway, right?
Very briefly, very briefly.
Yes. So I think what we offer basically is a product and knowledge. The knowledge is in the academia members and partially explicit on Zenodo GitHub, as well as the product. So we chose a route of the allowance for replication for the product, so they can use the product and can kind of build products on top. And the knowledge dissemination, I mean, we were trying to make it available everywhere so that the right stakeholders can pick it up. By the way, project is still going on. End of June is the end of the project. That's the point in time when everything is being published that we have, including all data, including algorithms, including technology, including documentation. Now, landscape scan, I think, let's maybe look into ownership first. So the ownership that we had, and that's a little complex with IHI projects. The standard terms say that there's a shared ownership. So, but that does not touch background IP. So this was the reason why we realized that putting that into a foundation or into a spin-off became quite complicated to run, in particular if you need to earn money with it. So that's why we made it open for access, so everyone can use it, and that was what the consortium actually agreed for. And the ownership then is basically that everyone can build on top of it also commercial models. That's basically the thing. Structure is, I think, there's no for profit. It's not for profit. It's basically open access. Mechanisms. Ooh, that's difficult to read now for me. Yeah, I think it's open licensing pretty much. And yeah, I think you saw the impact is to patients' healthcare, the science for sure. When I say academia, that's science, and industry and the world for sure. And that was the intent. And that this is a sustainable model is already during the last years has proven. I mean, you see that four commercial wearables are available with the algorithms. All the clinical research organizations that we worked with have brought that into their portfolio. And we hear about cell pharma companies moving that on. I cannot talk about Novartis because I cannot talk about internal projects, but yes, there is also something going on. So when I say going on, then it's about putting this approach of measurement into a clinical trial to generate the data for positive qualification opinion of a health authority. So that's work in progress and moving on after this end of the project.
Great. Thank you so much, Thilo. Just to recap what a great example this is as well, and I think in contrast to Eden, and here I really see the strengths of this deep stakeholder engagement to ensure impact and longevity, and it has lasted quite a long time, and it seems like it will as well. That's a real strength, as well as how well you guys have done dissemination and really engaged well with health authorities. In the interest of time and knowing that we're probably all eager to get to the panel, I will grab a question here, and then the others we can circulate, and happy to follow up with answers following the masterclass. So I'll take this question from Bert. For your outcomes, in addition to the evidence for regulatory qualification, how much attention was paid to the economic benefits of using these measures? And was there a kind of ROI calculation model for using the measures in clinical trials?
That's a very good question. I think we have not focused on that because typically when you go into a qualification exercise with such tools, you have to run both in parallel in order to demonstrate that they correlate and the data is being generated. Yeah, I mean, ROI questions are always based on the cost, and calculating the cost of such a difference is not so easy those days. But yes, I mean, that could be something that could happen once this becomes really a standard and has a more positive qualification opinion, to also kind of reduce patient burden by less clinical visits. Yes, absolutely. However, yeah, that is work in progress, and we've not, that was not our focus area. It was to make it work first.
Good. Thank you so much, Thilo. I will now move us to the next segment, which is our panel discussion, and happily welcome Matthias. Matthias, we are in your hands.
Yes, thank you very much, Lisa and Patrick and Thilo. This was really interesting and super relevant, I think, for all the projects we are running. I can recognize a lot of discussions from other projects as well, and draw parallels. So this panel, now it's a bit shorter, but it will be about reality. So when the reality hits basically the projects of securing the assets and making sure that the projects are impactful, and maybe maybe to you, Patrick, first, a question of, I mean, what do you see as kind of the biggest asset coming out of Eden, and what was the biggest barrier for securing or scaling that asset, and then the second question would be, how did you work with it? How did you get around it?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Matthias. I think if I were to say the tangible asset, I think the fact that this Eden Foundation exists as an entity to engage others is a tremendously valuable thing that I'm really thankful that as a project we put the effort during the project to make sure that it could have a successful launch immediately after the project. I think all too often there's plans for a sustainability plan, but there's not an implementation of a sustainability plan during the time. And I think that the tangible asset is there. I will say, though, I think the most important value proposition that Eden created actually is the intangible asset, which is building community. And by building community, I think it really does touch to what Lisa was talking about as it relates to adoption and replication, where what you're really trying to do is engage folks in a general movement. And I think that the Eden Project, and in partnership with the Odyssey community, has really enabled something that I think actually has been the reason why there's been tentacles that are running through so many other European projects, is this idea of togetherness of stakeholders from industry and government and academia working together. And I do think that that's something that is challenging to focus on community, particularly when you've got limited resources and you want to do what's right inside of the consortium. So it is a very real challenge. At the same time, I think it's the thing that I look at as the 10x enabler of what's possible is when you start to think about creating an ecosystem for everyone to engage in, not just the consortium itself.
Thanks. And so the foundation, I guess, was not planned at the beginning of the project, right? That was something that developed during the course of the project.
That's right. So we had a work package in IMI in the program, which was to come up with a sustainability plan. During that work package, one of the things identified was what would it look like if we were to create a foundation? But because we had that work package starting at the start of the project, we're able to not just come up with the idea of the merits of a foundation, but actually to instantiate it, get it up and running, establish some governance and ways of working, and then have that be a successful place to launch as the project formally completed.
Yeah, very good. Now, if you were to start a new project, so how would you do things differently if you had to start Eden again today?
Yeah, so we learned quite a lot about quite a lot in Eden, and some of it I'd say exceeded my expectations. But I'd say in particular, this idea of building a consortium of SMEs, of data partners, and creating the dissemination pathway through the Eden Academy, many of those things had this multiplicative value that came from the project that wasn't really what we had in mind. You know, the Eden Academy we created to support the SMEs. I did not imagine that we'd have thousands of learners around the world and lots of people outside of Europe that were using that resource. So I think as I look to future public-private partnerships in IHA, the thing that I'm looking for is how do we, one, not start by the idea that we're going to build new, but actually how do we build off of what's already out there? I think in the Eden Project, we did a good job of that by partnering with the Odyssey community, but we probably could have even leveraged existing work even further. And certainly future projects should keep building and keep stepping up on top of other things. I think that the other thing that I'd see is creating pathways where there's a difference between a one-off activity, such as data standardization or running a research project, versus creating an enduring system of continuous harmonization and continuous evidence generation, and getting folks to embrace that their participation in a project isn't for the goal isn't the life cycle of the project, but the goal is to initiate and be a catalyst to allow those partners to participate indefinitely thereafter. I think in Eden, several folks bought into that ethos, but it wasn't part of our core remit. And as I think about future projects, I think that's a real opportunity that all public-private partnerships can do, is really think about this as the galvanizing effect to get started, but not think of it as the end game by itself.
Very good. Thanks a lot. And Thilo, from your perspective for Mobilized, what do you think was the biggest asset that was generated in Mobilized, and what were the biggest barriers for you to scale that?
So I think maybe starting with the biggest barrier, I think if I could, I would have abolished the pandemic first, which was really a big barrier to success in the beginning during the project. Later in the project, it was much more about aligning the vision for feasibility of sustainability and getting everyone around the table aligned to this is the way forward, because there was such a diverse set of ideas. And then when we had our vision, it was about continuous funding, because every single time that you have an infrastructure, that you have an expert network, that you have something that needs operations, this is what needs to be funded. And so this is typically then a challenge bringing up. Now, what would I do different? We were going very broad. We were going very after I think 4 indications, and that was a strength, and that was a challenge at times because of this diversity and the size of the efforts. So going after less might have been an option. But at the same point in time, I have to put a caveat there, because actually the breadth also was an enabler, because that allowed us to attract attention in a broader community. So it's difficult to say what we would have done different. Maybe one thing is to generate more backup options for the sustainability. At the moment, we are just after kind of pharma partners or FPR companies to pick it up and to fund the next steps. It would also be great if we could have looked more into like changing standard of care, looking into other consortia results, or kind of feeding other consortia. There are other consortia now starting up, IHI, for example, for osteoarthritis, but that's something that could have worked better if we would have connected better there.
Yeah. So now what I hear you saying is also that basically it's also a little bit the alignment, which Patrick also actually mentioned. So it's the digital mobility outcome, and that's kind of the heritage of the project. But did you have a discussion already when you started the project on what you would that was the goal, or was it doing more research and explore the field, or did you have already a good idea of how things would be at the end of the day?
Well, the grant proposal obliges you to actually put a sustainability concept in place. So yes, we had an initial idea, but the challenge is that you're submitting that very early, and there's a 5-year in front of you that actually will change. And we needed to have a few rounds of discussion in the first few years, really to sort and to landscape the opportunities and to kind of organize the ideas that were going there. I mean, the spin-off is always the first idea, but as I mentioned, funding is always the challenge and you need a honeypot. And we realized, for example, if you have data and you've given out the data once, then having someone pay the second time is really not a business model that works. So I think that's where we needed to form our ideas in the beginning. But yes, there were initial ideas in the sustainability concept section of the grant proposal that were going into the direction of how can we make it into the community. But at this point in time, this was more about dissemination. This was more about potentially a spin-off. And it needs to be vague. I mean, it's 5 years down the road, and you don't know what you get out of a research project.
Very good. Would you have any advice for others starting up a new project or proposal to secure scale up?
Yes, I think my key suggestion would be to start and think fast, furious, and early, and continue that thinking and don't lock it in too early. But also think realistic and truly test the options, because this kind of pressure testing the options will avoid later surprises. Don't fall in romance with one model. Have your backup options ready. And I think that
you also mentioned the change of personnel and strategies during the course of the project as one of the challenges. But I was about to comment that because that's reality, right? That's about the strategic fit. So it's actually probably good that the project can react to those new realities.
Exactly.
Patrick, for any advice from your side for future projects, new partners starting up new projects?
Well, I wish I had this field guide when we were thinking about new projects. And I think that, as Lisa highlighted very nicely, just having the structured conversations at the start of the project to think about where you want to be. If everything goes well, where do you want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I think that that's a really useful exercise. And as Thilo was saying, like it is a section required in a submission, but my experience with some other projects has been sometimes it's seen as a little bit of a obligatory checkbox exercise, but I think that there's real value in actually taking it as a critical look to assume that your project's going to be successful. Where do you go from there? And that's a really productive conversation to have. So I do encourage folks that are thinking about their projects to be thinking past their project, not just for the project itself.
Thank you. Perfect. That's excellent. So back to you, Lisa. Do we want to open up for more questions from the audience if time allows? I'm not sure exactly how strict we have to be on the time.
Maybe we can take a question if the group has anything that they want to posit in the chat. If that leaves us, then we still have a few minutes for closing remarks. I think we can do that, and I'd be curious to hear, what questions the group has.
Yes. So do we have any questions in the chat that we haven't addressed yet?
Yeah, maybe while questions are coming in, I can just say, to draw a red thread between the examples of Eden and Mobilize D is, change really is the only constant. And so plan to change. And I would also say success in both of these cases, really, a lot of it was aligning a broad set of stakeholder incentives and doing that effectively, in addition to all of the smart science and the breakthrough innovation. And I think as well, just have fun and know that success is possible, and think about just the impact that you can have, 5 or 10 years from now, and making health better for everybody.
Yeah, and actually, I think the your field manual really captures the key questions quite nicely. Actually, to really think about the entire ecosystem and what drives impact, both the pull and the push of the impact, and doing the landscape analysis is really important to do that at the beginning of the project. And certainly the private partners, I think they do think in those terms all the time. The challenge is, of course, that at the beginning of the project, you often have you're very busy writing the application, and the question is whether when you have time to do such a detailed analysis at that time, because it's not funded at that time, right? So it's your own free time that you're spending on it, and so sometimes these things are being done in the course of the project, which is probably okay as well. But yeah. Unless there are any specific questions, I don't see anything specifically. Then I think maybe it's time to wrap up, if you agree. So again, I think this was super useful to have both the two examples from Eden and Mobilized, but also the field manual and the experience from the IMI, which of course is applicable to IHI in the exactly same terms. So scaling project results, making sure that they are impactful. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to ultimately, of course, benefit patient society, but consider all these different stakeholders in the landscape, and making sure that we think about how. So what are the different mechanisms of success and mechanisms for impact for the many different stakeholders in the system? And there's not just one solution. There are many different solutions, as nicely lined out in the field manual, and these solutions should be considered and also adjusted along the course of the project. Of course, as we have seen with very good examples here, sometimes it's a legal entity, sometimes it's a biomarker or something else that pops up, and it's really changing also during the course of the lifetime of the project. So with that, back to you, Lisa.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthias, and thanks for closing us out well. Just want to again take a moment to thank all of our participants today, Thilo and Patrick and Matthias and Nicholas. Also, thank you to IHI and FPF for sponsoring us today. And then just to say to the practitioners, good luck. We're here. I think we have an active learning community, and so yeah, we wish you all the best in your journey. One practical point is that all these resources will be made available to you following the masterclass. This will also be posted online in case you want to revisit it or share with others in your consortium. So thanks so much, everyone. And with that, I will close this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice one.
Take care.
Bye-bye.